Hello, ladies and gentlemen, it's Rei-Lin, and today I'm going to bring you some more Tom Clancy's The Division. I wish there was a lot of positive stuff that I had to say about the game, but in just the time that it's taken for me to do my last video on The Division, where I was actually giving it a lot of credit for all the good things that it was doing, that was a month ago. And unfortunately, the game has just kind of slowly been spiraling towards a black hole. It hasn't quite passed the event horizon yet to totally disappear off the face of the earth, but it's getting there. And unfortunately, I'm not sure if it can recover. I mean, just since the game has came out, according to the Steam numbers that they were posting, the game's lost over 80% of its player base just in the last couple of months. And that's pretty severe, in my opinion. It's really hard to enjoy a game like this when you really can't get groups together for dungeons, and more or less it just becomes really hard to group up with people, even in the dark zone. There's a couple of things I wanted to focus on, basically just PvE problems and the PvP problems, and maybe throw out my own 2 cents on what I think they could do to help improve it. Now, we do have a new patch that'll be coming. There's still no announced date for the patch 1.2. It's supposed to fix a lot of issues with the game, a lot of broken talents, a lot of broken perks, a lot of broken weapon talents and armor talents, and some things are getting nerfed and some things are getting buffed, and it's going to be a rather large patch that I'm sure is just going to end up breaking something else. It seems like every time that Massive comes out and does this whole patch thing, even if it's like a minor patch to just fix a couple of exploits, it ends up breaking 2 or 3 other things or making certain talents either stop working or do goofy stuff. So it's definitely seems to me like Massive, they're just trying too hard, I think, and not giving themselves enough time to put these patches out and fix everything they need to fix and give it some time to be tested before they just roll it out and let us, the players, find all the stupid shit and get more and more upset with the game in general. Overall, I think when I bought the game, I paid, quite a bit of money. I bought the best edition of the game. It was like $100 or something. It came with all the DLCs that are going to be coming out and all the season pass stuff. And, I haven't been disappointed. I got a couple of months. I've put over 430 hours in the game at this point, according to Steam. So I've played the crap out of this thing, and I really had a lot of fun, and I still do have fun. But now it's in the stage where I can only play for a half hour, maybe an hour, log on, maybe run a couple dailies, and then log off and just hope that something improves. I think the problem is even if patch 1.2 does come out and they do fix a lot of the issues that people are having with the game, I honestly don't think it's going to bring back a lot of people who just got completely fed up and just quit, uninstalled the game, quit, and will never come back and never help Massive out again. I'm hoping that 1.2 will be the patch that kind of starts this game rolling up the hill again and getting higher and higher up into everybody's hearts and minds that this is, okay, it's improving, it's going up from, basically shit to something that's really, really good, and I really want to play it. There are other games that went through this same kind of thing. I think Battlefield 4 came out, and it was nearly unplayable with bugs and glitches and hacks and just server crashes and instability with the servers, and over time they fixed that. Diablo 3, I think, was also another game that this was occurring, is that the game was just so crappy that a lot of people just quit, but they're slowly winning hearts back, and I'm hoping that The Division is one of those games that Massive will put some time into and will finally fix everything before there's nobody left to care. So anyway, let's talk about what I think one of the major issues is in PvE. And, of course, in PvE, everything you have as far as dungeons are missions, okay? So if I happen to say dungeon, I'm just used to fantasy MMO type of rhetoric, so it's synonymous. It's a dungeon or it's a mission, so I'm probably going to end up saying dungeon just because it's easier for my brain to calculate it and spit it out of my stupid mouth. Anyway, so for PvE, what this game is overall is a loot-based shooter. You go to a dungeon, you're running around killing mobs in PvE, and they drop loot. And it's still the kind of color-coded loot system that like World of Warcraft made famous. You have gray items, and then green, which are better, blue are better than the green, purple's better than the blue, and then you have high-end, which is yellow. So the yellow items are what you want. And once you hit in-game, your goal is to get as many yellow items, and you can look here. I do have a few high ends and a few other parts that are from the incursions, which are just barely a step above the high ends, but we'll get to that later. So we have the high ends, and that's your goal. In a patch a little bit before now, probably 3.5 weeks, maybe a month ago, massive added change to all of the bosses in all of the dungeons and the world bosses and bosses that appear in the Dark Zone. As long as they're a named boss, and as long as it's the end boss of a dungeon, you're basically going to get a free high-end piece of loot. Now, that sounds well and good. They're always going to drop a high-end piece of loot. That's great. That sounds awesome. And obviously, if you're playing a dungeon, there are 3 difficulties: normal, which you usually play when you're leveling through your story, a hard mode, and then a challenging mode. And not all the dungeons have challenging modes yet. That's coming supposedly in the future. And so the challenging mode loot is a little bit better. It's a little bit higher gear score. So that's great. That sounds like a good thing. And it is a good thing. The problem is that this game is also very much like Diablo in the fact that every piece of gear is complete RNG, whether it's a weapon, a performance mod for your armor, or a gear mod for your weapons. It doesn't matter what it is. When it drops, it's 100% random what the hell it is, for one thing, and 2, it's what the stats are on it. So let's make an assumption. Let's say I'm going after this here chest piece. I want a gunslinger vest, so I'm going to go kill a boss that I've noticed seems to drop a lot of body armor. So let's assume that I run a dungeon and I get 20 of these gunslinger vests. I have to run it 20 times, and every time I have been so lucky that he drops 20 gunslinger vests on those runs. Now you can see here I've got armor values, I have a main stat value, I have a talent, and then I have major and minor attributes. And it got this one was lucky, and I got a mod slot to go along with it. I didn't think it was too bad. It was an upgrade for me at the time. But here's the problem. If you saw a list of 20 of these gunslinger vests right here, I could click on each one and go down through it. Every single one of these statistics would be different. Every single one of them. And right now, at least until 1.2 patch comes out, everyone's going to want Reckless. So out of those 20 that I now have in my inventory, if you can imagine that I'm looking for only this talent right off the bat. So out of those 20, let's say 2 have Reckless. That means that the 18 that remain, I don't care about. I don't care how good the stats are, because you can't recalibrate the talent, so you're stuck with whatever the talent is. So you're going to deconstruct all 18 of those other chest pieces. You're going to get some crafting material out of it, so it's not a horrible deal. But then out of those 2 that remain, they may not have any of the stats on them that you want. So then you're going to just deconstruct those 2 and end up spending about 3 hours running a dungeon 20 times to get absolutely nothing you can use. Not a damn thing. Now, you could say, well, it's supposed to take time to gear up. Well, that may be true, but I mean, that's a lot of time to put into running a particular dungeon, or just running all the dungeons just so you don't get bored. I mean, I don't see the need to have to run one particular dungeon or any of these dungeons more than, 50 or 60 times and still have no guarantee whatsoever that you're going to get anything you can use. So that is kind of running people off, because, yeah, don't get me wrong, PvE players like myself, we don't mind the grind, but if there's no eventual reward, it kind of just takes the shine right off. And as soon as your brain starts to realize, what the hell am I doing? What's the goal here? I'm going to gear up, but I'm never going to get the gear that I want, because the RNG on the gear is exactly that. It's so random that there's just no way I'm ever going to get the exact item that I want. The chance is just way beyond manageable for me, so I'm just not even going to bother anymore. And, it can happen also here on the weapons. The weapons, they have 3 talents. And a, as in the case of my classic M1A, it's a marksman rifle, so it has a headshot damage. This number can be different. The damage can be different. The stats aren't necessarily going to be different here because of RNG, but these talents are definitely going to be different, and you kind of want certain talents based on the weapon class that you're using or you enjoy. Obviously, you're not going to use a crappy weapon, but you're looking also for the talents that are on that weapon, and if a certain weapon doesn't have a certain talent, you throw it out completely. It's completely useless. And you could change my scenario to I've ran that same dungeon 20 more times, and every time I got really lucky, he dropped 20 weapons, and if it was 18 of those weapons were light machine guns and I'm looking for marksman rifles, well, immediately I've got to deconstruct 18 weapons. It doesn't matter how good those weapons might be. I don't care. I don't use light machine guns. I hate the light machine guns, and so they're useless to me. And then out of the two weapons that are left, they're both marksman rifles with really low damage rolls, really crappy headshot damage, and they don't have the talents you want, so those two get deconstructed as well. So, what do I think that they could do? Well, there's two paths I think they could go on here. I think the simplest and easiest for them, at least from my perspective, since they're kind of playing this a little bit like Diablo, go all the way. Make it like Diablo when it comes to the loot drops. Diablo, if anyone doesn't know, basically is like loot pinatas. You kill a boss, they just shower you with cool stuff. But it also has the same RNG. Every single thing that drops can be completely different, even from other things that are exactly the same. So if you got Joe Blow's Sword of Doom from Joe Blow, and you got 20 Joe Blow's Swords of Doom, every single one of them is going to be different. But because you got so many so quickly, the RNG is sort of balanced out, because out of 30 or 40 runs, which take you very little time in Diablo, especially if you've already got some gear, eventually you're going to get something that you can definitely use, that is a definite upgrade, and you're going to keep. And yeah, it might take you a couple days to do it, but you're pretty much going to be guaranteed you're going to get something that is useful to you. So do it just like in Diablo. So I run a dungeon, let's say I'm going to put it on hard mode. I kill the boss at the end of a hard mode dungeon, any of them, doesn't matter. And that boss is going to drop 10 high-end pieces of loot. And I'll be more specific. They're not going to drop performance mods. They're not going to drop any kind of armor mod or weapon mod. They're going to drop either a piece of armor or a weapon, because the crafting system would be where you would throw all of the weapon and armor mods. Those should no longer drop. Those should be what you use your crafting for. So your crafting will make the best mods in the game, and the bosses will start dropping some of the best weapons and armor in the game. Now, they've now dropped 10. So now, if I've run the dungeon a couple of times, I'm going to have like 30 pieces of gear. And they're all going to be high-end. And out of all of that gear, I'm going to find at least one thing that, even if it's only a marginal upgrade, it will be an upgrade, or at the very worst case, a side grade to what I've got. But it will kind of take the edge off of the RNG just a little bit, because everyone likes to see shiny stuff on the ground and lists of cool stuff. You never know. And let's say, okay, that's in hard mode. In challenge mode, the end boss will drop 20 high-end pieces of loot, armor or weapons. And there you go. Right there, you've already solved one of the most frustrating things about it. And since they've nerfed the crafting to the point where it's a very, very tedious and pain in your ass kind of grind, because out of all of that stuff that has dropped, you're going to deconstruct a lot of it. That's a given. Some of that stuff is still going to be useless to you. But because you're getting so much stuff and deconstructing so much stuff, you will actually be able to keep up with your crafting material enough that you'll be able to go into your base of operations and go actually craft some stuff for the good stuff that you end up keeping. And you won't be falling behind and spending 2 or 3 hours every day just wandering around the city, going to the nodes and picking up some electronics out of a box and tools out of a box and weapon parts out of a box. You're not going to have to spend a lot of time doing boring stuff. You're going to be able to do the dungeons that you're wanting to do, and almost every 1 or 2 runs you're going to get some kind of gear that you can use and is useful to you, or maybe useful at least to your build. It's going to be a slight upgrade, or might even be a big upgrade depending on what level you are, and That is how I've always kind of seen the game. If you're going to have an RNG based game, you've got to have a crap ton of loot drop, or it's just way too many hours spent for absolutely no hope of ever seeing what you want out of that gear. The secondary path that they could do, the monster on the block, World of Warcraft. It's been around forever. Do the loot just like World of Warcraft. Every boss in the game would have a loot table. Let's say they drop 20 things on their loot table. It's all high-end weapons or gear of some kind, and then you make the gear that they drop have set stats. That means no matter how many times you get this version's Joe Blow's Sword of Doom, you can have 20 of them in your inventory and all of them will be identical. Statistically, there's no difference. So, now, in that case, if they went that direction with it, now people could go online into the forums and they'd say, well, here's what this boss drops, here's what this boss drops, and then you could plan which bosses and which dungeons you need to do. He's like, well, I like LMGs, so that boss drops the LMG, this one over here drops the chest piece that I need, that one drops the boots I want, that one has the cosmetic thing that I need, that has the pistol, and so on and so on. And now you're pretty much guaranteed by the time you've ran a dungeon 10 or 15 times, which sounds like a lot, but in this game it's really not. Most of the hard mode dungeons take 10 minutes, maybe 15, and so it's a lot different than, say, a World of Warcraft dungeon, which can take you a half hour even if you're overgeared for it. But for the most part, it would go quick, and it would still take you a couple of days to do a lot of runs, but again, because it's a set loot table, you're going to see everything on that loot table eventually. Within a few days, you will have what you want off that boss. And they could change it to where the hard mode, out of the pool of 20 things, he'll drop 5 things. And on challenge mode, he'll drop 10 things from his loot table. And on challenge mode, the loot tables would be different. It would be higher quality loot. It would be a different loot table. But they would be set for what the bosses are, and the stats on the items would be not random, not RNG, so that you could choose and pick which dungeons you're going to gear up. The hard modes could then be used to gear up a certain kind of build and gear up to do the challenge mode. It'd be like a stepping stone kind of progress. As it is now, a lot of people go straight into the hard modes or straight into the challenge mode as soon as they can, whether they have gear or not, because they just can't find anything, and they're hoping to kind of shortcut and have use the matchmaker to find a group that already has really good gear and carries them through, and hoping that the end boss will drop something they can actually frickin' use and slowly gear up kind of backwards from what you would think you would want to do it. So you have that. You also have world bosses. You probably killed a bunch of them while you were leveling, and the world bosses in the division are a one-time kill. So if you've already killed them, they're gone forever. I would completely change that right off the bat. I would make them respawn every 48 hours, and I would give them a loot table. It would be a loot table of, let's just say, all of the challenge mode bosses' loot. So any one of the world bosses will drop any of the high-end loot that a dungeon boss on challenging mode could drop. So it's a very much bigger list of things that could drop, and those bosses that are wandering around the world would be stronger. They would be like level 34 or 35, and they have lots of minions, so they would be a tough fight. You would have to go in to that fight knowing what the hell you're doing, and you'd have to be careful. But the loot they would drop, they'd only drop one piece of loot, but you could farm it every 48 hours. You could go and you could farm it, and it would be manageable at that point. And then you have a chance to get some challenge level loot and up your gear score, as long as you were really careful or you had some friends. And it would be all PvE, and it would be something to do, all the time. Well, do I do my dailies? Do I want to go after the world bosses? Do I want to do hard modes and gear up a little, maybe do a challenge mode? It would be some serious challenge, and I think it would make the game a lot more fun for everybody. So that's kind of my idea on the PvE side of things. Now the PvP side of things, and mainly what I'm talking about when we look at the map here, is of course the Dark Zone. The Dark Zone, the Grief Zone, the Troll Zone, the Bully Zone, that's basically all the Dark Zone is. It's basically a PvE zone that lets people be complete, utter assholes, and nothing more. There is no real PvP in these zones. It's basically griefing people by people that have really good gear, de-leveling themselves to get themselves in the lower brackets, and then completely dominating anybody in the first 4 zones within a millionth of a second before anyone has time to react. It's just bullies, it's griefing, it's absolutely no fun whatsoever. It is the worst possible thing they could have done in this game. And the problem with the Dark Zone doesn't just end there. There's a lot of hackers in the Dark Zone, and yes, they're trying their best at Massive to nail these hackers and take them out of the game, but people are going to always find a way around it. As long as everything is client-side, the Dark Zone is going to be hackable. Now, the console versions fare a lot better. You're not really hacking those, PlayStation 4 and Xbox One, so this is mainly a problem in the PC version, which is obviously what I'm playing. So the Dark Zone is just a really terrible idea. I mean, there's absolutely nothing to be gained by going rogue, and it makes no sense storyline-wise, in my opinion, for going rogue. It's just a horrible idea. Any game that I've seen that's tried to mesh PvE players into a PvP zone, it's just failed. It's failed horribly. PvEers don't want a PvP. That's why they're called PvEers. And the PvPers in this game, they don't really want a PvP either. They just want to use their E-peen waving gear scores to go down and kill people that don't stand a chance. Because as soon as anybody in these 3 roaming around think they're badass, when the real badass PvPers show up, what do? They die or they run like little bitches all the way up to Dark Zone 5 and 6 to hide. So don't let them fool you. Very few people in the Dark Zone PvP for the pure enjoyment of actually PvP, and that they want one-on-one or they want group-on-group, and not something that's griefing. They're not just killing random people. They're just doing some fun stuff against groups that they know have the same kind of gear scores. It's so rare that I've only seen it on Twitch streams. So the problem with the Dark Zone, and the reason why the Dark Zone is even more of a pain in the ass, especially for PvEers, is the fact that you can see here there's safe rooms in the Dark Zone. These safe rooms have vendors which sell blueprints. To buy the blueprints, you have to have a Dark Zone rank that matches the rank of the blueprint you want, and Dark Zone credits, which you can only get by killing the NPCs in these Dark Zones. And the best gear in the game right now is from these patterns, from these safe houses, and that's a big pain in your ass, because it means if you want the best gear in the game, you're going to have to go in here and grind your ass off over and over and over in a little loop, and then, and it's not efficient to go up to the higher level Dark Zones, because for whatever reason, Massive decided that the difference between a Dark Zone 1 NPC and a Dark Zone 6 NPC is like 15 experience. It's completely not worth it, considering the difficulty jump between the zones goes up quite significantly in 5 and 6. So, it means that if you don't have a group of friends to group up and do a 4-man just wiping the floor with everything, you're not going to level very fast, and it's very, very dangerous to go in here solo, because anyone can just see that you're solo when you're running by and blow you away. And when you die in the Dark Zone, whether it's to players or to NPCs, you lose experience, and you lose keys, and you lose Dark Zone credits, all of which is what the hell you're trying to get in the first place. You can de-level if you die enough. And even the rogues, the whole point of the rogues to go rogue was so that they get massive amounts of rewards. And even though they have changed the rewards to not be as punishing as it was when the game first came out, it's still not enough. Now the rewards for going rogue kind of exceed any problems for dying as a rogue, unlike what it used to. So it's kind of lopsided towards just everyone killing everyone and not killing the NPCs. And so, of course, that's frustrating for PvE players, because I don't want to go in here and risk dying. I don't want to go in here and grind for 3 hours and just barely get to like levels, let's say 50, and then I die once to some player or a group of players that just come in and raffle stomp everybody on the map, and then I de-level back to 49. Now, granted, it's only a couple of hours of work, but hey, some people only have an hour to play every day. You get on to do your damn daily, and you get the hell off because you don't want to spend any time in here grinding. That's perfectly acceptable. So what would I do? Well, first of all, I would turn the damn idea of the rogue stuff off completely. I would not have the Dark Zone have any PvP or player killing whatsoever. For those of you that have not played the Division yet, or thinking about at least going through the story or haven't finished the story, here's a spoiler. A spoiler warning. There's absolutely no reason whatsoever for there to be any rogue agents in the damn Dark Zone to begin with. If you go through the story, you find out that the first wave agents are the only ones that went rogue with Aaron Keener. So, either the first wave agents were already dead before Keener arrived in the Dark Zone to start helping, or he asked after he went rogue if anyone wanted to join him. So if they joined him, hooray, you know, you're alive. If you didn't join him, he killed you. And so as you go through the story, you're killing all of the other first wave agents who went rogue and joined Keener. The only rogue agent left at the end of the game is Keener himself. He's the only one. There should not be any Dark Zone need to go rogue. And since we're part of the second wave, which I assume is all the players that started the game is considered the second wave, there's absolutely no reason for us to go rogue in the Dark Zone. At this point, all of the cool loot that the JTF had to leave behind when they pulled out of the Dark Zone, when they lost control, has been taken already by the rioters and the LMB and the cleaners. That's why they're elites. That's why they're veterans. That's why they're bosses all over the place. They have all the cool gear. And so you kill them and take the gear for yourself just like you do in any other PvE situation. So there's absolutely no reason to be fighting other people for the damn loot. It makes no sense even from a storyline point of view. There are no more rogues. You're going into the Dark Zone because it was the hardest hit and it has the hardest enemies in there. It's kind of like one big giant elite dungeon that just gets harder as you go north. That's it. So get rid of the PvP completely. If you want to have the Dark Zone credits and everything be in the safe rooms, fine. Just get rid of the PvP. And then what you do is you add actual battlegrounds. Well, that doesn't fit the story, you might say. Well, it doesn't have to necessarily meld 100% with the story. Well, how you get around that is you say it's a simulator. It's a rogue operating, it's a simulation. The players aren't real. It's like you're hooked up via the Matrix and you're in a simulated battle. It's a battleground, and you're testing your abilities against the other agents, and no one's going to die. Everyone respawns just like in any other first-person shooter like Battlefield or Call of Duty or Overwatch. You're just going to be fighting basically yourselves, and you're not going to die or anything. So that's how you get around that. It's a simulator because the first wave, so many went rogue that they're worried about it, and we want to train the second wave of agents to make sure that if it happens again, they know what to do. So there would be a nice little storyline attachment. However, since we're trying to get this done quick and easy, instead of Massive going out and having to actually create real separate battlegrounds that are separated from New York or whatever, what you do at the beginning is you'd have a few different ways of doing that. One, it would be team versus team. So 4-on-4, then 8-on-8, 12-on-12, and then 16-on-16. Now, what happens is you queue up with whatever group matchmaking you want, whichever, well, everyone's going to go 16 versus 16. Sure, go for it. So you queue up, and then once it has enough people to make the battleground, what the computer will then do, it's going to pick somewhere on this entire map. And depending on the size, let's assume it's a 16 by 16 group, just to make it easy, it's going to randomly grab, like say this section here, it's going to go do over here like this. It's going to make a random selection. That will now be your battleground. It's obviously not going to interfere with anything. It's an instance just for you guys, and you're going to go into there. It's going to go whoa and zoom down here like this and go whoop, and then you guys are going to be on two teams, and you're going to just go, and it's going to be team deathmatch. Go at it. There you go. And it's going to be random. So if it was, if it was a 4x4, well, maybe it's going to pick over here. Just going to go do it, and it's going to pick one block. Or maybe it'll be over here. Or maybe it'll be going from here into the Dark Zone. It's going to grab a random part so that the battleground is always different. It's always unique. No one can learn the map and get to the best spots or anything like that. It's always, you're going to have to be on your toes. And just thinking of the map itself, just how much area this really is. You have underground areas, you have street level areas, you have buildings that you can go in, and you have rooftop fights. There is tons of places that could randomly pick that will be really difficult to memorize, but you're going to have to. You're going to have to get used to where that building is, or where some of the places most people don't know about. Maybe there's a door about, and you can sneak around. I mean, it would be a really intense battleground, I think, and it would be quick and simple. The second thing you do is, well, what's the point of doing it? Well, in the battlegrounds, they would have to come up with a currency, battleground currency, honor, whatever they want it to be called, and then in your base of operations, they would add a battleground vendor. This would be where you could queue up for the battlegrounds and go PvP. So now they would add a battleground vendor, and on that battleground vendor would be gear, just like the World of Warcraft scenario, where the gear would have a set stat allocation, and it would have several versions of that based on what kind of build you have, whether you're, a DPS, a tank, or a healer. So then you could spend that honor that you're gaining in these simulated battles to buy PvP specific gear. It would have PvP specific talents that only worked in PvP on the weapons and on the armor. And it would be set stats that are useful, like say maybe they'd have a lot of burn resistance and exotic damage resilience and extra health and extra armor, so that you could basically make yourself a tank that does firearms, or maybe you could have a full glass cannon build that only has offensive abilities and really good talents on that armor, but you have to pick and choose. It would be a very tough decision for people to either go hybrid, maybe they go all tank, maybe they go all DPS, and basically you could buy the gear that suits your build, and it wouldn't take that much time out of massive busy schedule of fixing all the other crap, since they don't have to focus immediately in the short term of making specific battlegrounds that look different, and maybe they take place in different areas because it is a simulation. They could just do it to where it's just randomly picking areas of the map to make a battleground, and then you get some nice gear from it if you do it enough. And so I think that in and of itself would alleviate so much of the problem with the game. It would get rid of the griefing completely. The hacking would go away, because the Dark Zone would no longer allow PvP. And then the PvPers would be happy, because then they would be fighting people that have similar gear levels to their own, and eventually everyone would have some good gear, and it would just be a battleground free-for-all PvP deathmatch. And obviously as time went on, they could add like capture the flag, or maybe a mode, like I'm sure some of people have gone through their story. I've seen a few of these places where you had to pick up a suitcase, and then you could only use your sidearm, and you had to carry that suitcase very slowly to an area to place it down. You can have a mode like that where you have to guard one of your guys. It's like capture the flag, but you're forced to walk, and so your team would have to kind of support you to get you somewhere, and things like that. There's all kinds of things they could do. You could base a lot of it on World of Warcraft or any other MMO that's been out since 2004. There are tons of ideas out there that Massive could latch onto and throw in different variations on all of this stuff. And I think that in and of itself, right off the bat, would improve the game 100%. It's, at least for me personally. At the end of the day, it's win-win for everybody. The PvPers get some PvP gear, and they get to PvP like they really want to, instead of griefing and just being downright assholes. And the PvEers kind of get what they need. They get the gear that they want so that they can do harder and harder PvE stuff. And then eventually you're going to do the incursions, which are the hardest, but obviously drop the best gear in the game. And with patch 1.2, a lot of people are basically saying this is it. The game is hanging by a thread, and that thread is 1.2. If it doesn't come out guns blazing and fix as much stuff as possible and add as much content as we need to keep going, and they change the loot drops, they change all this stuff, if it's still basically more of the same bullshit, then they're just going to quit altogether, and they're going to lose their entire player base just because of that reason. I mean, I've listed what I think is the problem in PvE, or one of my personal pet peeves. And in the PvP side of things, it's not PvP. It's just griefing and trolling and being a bully, basically. And I know not everyone goes into the Dark Zone to do that, but that's basically what it's coming down to. And, and even if they use the reasoning, well, if I go rogue, I get a lot more money than grinding the mobs, so there's a reason to do it. That's not really a good excuse or a good reason, just to pick on people that are just trying to get along in the game. I equate that similar to high-level Unicums and World of Tanks dropping down and pretty much bullying everybody in tier 2 and tier 3 tanks with their overpowered tank of choice with 5-6 skill crews, and just the idea that they're way better than anyone that's been playing the game for 2 weeks, So it's kind of similar in that way, and it's bad, and it's making the game look really bad. And I'm hoping beyond hope that at the end of the day, something will give, and that Massive will start to implement some of what I've said, and I'm sure tons of other videos have said similar things, and that to me would definitely make the game a lot more fun. As the game is right now, just hanging on by a thread, if they drop the price to like a $20 to $25 range, I would say pick it up at that point if you haven't tried it, because the storyline is good, the game and the graphics are excellent. There's a lot of good to be had on the storyline, and it's a great game up until you hit max level, and then the grind kicks you right in the face, and you realize there is absolutely no way in hell I'm doing this. Maybe for a couple days I would do something, but not at the rate that this game has you doing it. And so that's how I'm looking at the game now. It's kind of gone downhill. I'm hoping it doesn't get sucked into the black hole at the end. I'm hoping at the last minute somebody sends out a lifeline and pulls it back just a little bit, pulls it away from that black hole, away from the event horizon, so that we can actually turn this into a really, really fun game that continues to get better and better as time goes on. Otherwise, the game's just going to sink, and a lot of people are going to be very upset because they feel that it's just going to be a waste of their money. Anyway, that is going to do it for this video. I just wanted to kind of get my thoughts and my feelings out on the game. The Division, since I've been playing it pretty much non-stop for the last 4 weeks. And I wanted you guys to kind of see where the game has gone in that time and get my true feelings now that I've had more than enough time to kind of sink my teeth into every aspect of the game at this point. And just thought I would pass on the information. If you like the video, please press the like button down below. It does help me out. And if you haven't had a chance to subscribe, you can click down at the bottom of your screen here in just a second, and that'll give you the latest updates for every video that I upload, so you guys can come check it out. Anyway, that's today's video. Thanks a lot for watching. Take care, and I'll talk to you all next time.